What's up, everybody? This is Joel Sigrist. Welcome back to a new episode of Becoming Ourselves. This is an exciting episode. We're diving back into health as we talk about becoming healthy, wealthy, and wise. We bring on a guest today, Danielle Cortez. We'll get into her bio. She's done a lot of very cool things. She's got a lot of cool credentials behind her name. But Danielle really dives into nutrition, into weight management, and into how to cook for yourself when you're not sure what to cook and you're tired of spending money and going and eating out at restaurants and getting takeout. I know that's something that I struggle with. I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with. It's something that Jesse struggles with too, and because he's not here recording this intro with me, he struggles with it way more than I do. This is an exciting episode. I think Danielle has a lot of good things to say, and I think you're going to learn a lot from it. Without further ado, let's get into it. Danielle is a registered dietitian specializing in obesity and weight management. She is the senior director of coaching at Enara Health and currently resides in San Diego with her husband, daughter, and her dog. She did her dietetic internship at UCSF and is originally from New York City. Danielle, one of the things that you mentioned before we started recording, just as we're chatting, is that you are a registered dietitian. You are not a nutritionist. Can you talk about what the difference is and that distinction and why that feels significant to you?
Sure. Yeah. It's a great question. So nutritionist has become a catch-all for anybody that works in nutrition. And it's a little dangerous because different people that work in nutrition have different credentialing and different backgrounds and different education and expertise. Registered dietitians are people that need a bachelor's degree in nutrition and dietetics. They typically, they often go on to masters, but a lot of us go right into a dietetic internship, which you actually have to match into, much like a residency and or internship in medical field. And that's usually about 1 year. It could be clinically based. It could be educationally, academically based. And then you have to take a kind of hard exam and then have continuing education units that you work towards every 5 years. So that includes, classes or research or conferences. But in some states, the nutritionist name is actually licensed and cannot be used by people that are not registered dietitians. In a lot of states, that's actually not true. And anybody can call themselves a nutritionist no matter their background, which is why there's a big distinction there.
Gotcha. So there's going to be some states where it's really obvious, and then other states where it's a really nebulous term. And so you want to be pretty precise with kind of the language there.
Exactly. Yeah. And then, so you have hospitals, dietitians are the ones that are working in hospitals and in clinical care. And yeah, they're the ones that are able to do that.
Very cool.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
As we get into the conversation of like weight management and health and nutrition and diet and all of these things, there is a lot of bullshit out there. There's a lot of information that just gets thrown around on social media and on TikTok and YouTube, and wherever you look, you could find any amount of content that says whatever you want it to say, right? Like you can find people that back any of it. What are the credentials that you would trust from a source that you find online?
Yeah, I think it's a good question because nutrition's always been a hot topic. It's always been a space people want to get into, make money off of, be interested in. And I call myself like a part-time myth buster because people come in, they're like, well, I can get this information from a magazine. I can get it from Instagram. I'm like, well, I mean, not exactly. But I think an RD is somebody who I would trust, or someone that has a master's degree in nutrition or a PhD in nutrition, and they're not necessarily a dietitian, because there's a little bit, that's a route that some people take and some people don't. There's a lot of great researchers out there that have higher education in nutrition, and they are perfectly qualified to talk about this stuff. And, just like exercise, I would trust people that have credentialing in exercise physiology or physical activity and, physical training. So, and I trust them for exercise, not necessarily nutrition. And you can take a class, you can take a course. It doesn't necessarily mean you can speak on everything in the same way that someone who has the bachelor's degree or the internship can talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Kenny, you want to build out your team a little bit of for my physical workout plan, I would want to talk to some sort of a physical. I'm not talking very clearly here. You'd want to talk to somebody who has credentials in that, but they won't be able to tell me exactly what diet I should be eating, and a dietitian wouldn't be able to tell me exactly what workout plan I should be doing, right?
Right. Unless, yeah. And I mean, there are dietitians out there that are, uh, gosh, I can't think of the name of, there's different ways that you can become a personal trainer or, an expert in exercise. And they have their own sort of credentialing, ACSM, and then there's another one. But, there are dietitians that have that credentialing, and there are trainers that have a degree in nutrition, in bachelor's or master's or dietetic. So yeah, you do want to look at what sort of training did they get, and go from there. And I think there's enough of us out there, enough of those people out there to go seek them out.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's, like for a while on Twitter and on Instagram, I was getting all those ads from like somebody who's got 15,000 followers because they're jacked and they're, now they feel qualified to be able to share their, their course and their, their training plan and diet and everything because they're in good shape. So obviously they must have the credentials that, that back that up,
right.
which is not.
It's true. Yeah. And there's actually a fun fact is that doctors only get like one course of nutrition during medical school.
Oh, interesting.
So yes, I think the best doctors know that they're not nutrition experts and refer to dietitians, both in the hospital and in other clinical settings, for their expertise. And we really appreciate that quite a bit because there is a lack there. And, some have done extra work or training, sure, but it's not the norm. So there, you got to watch out for those, people staying within their scope.
Yeah. Oh, that's
I love
interesting.
that.
Yeah.
That feels like pretty reminiscent of a lot of fields. I work in finance, and I am not a tax expert. I am much more of a personal finance expert. But if you have complicated tax situation, like I know a little bit, but not enough to be paid to be a tax expert, and that feels pretty related in that sense. Where it's we're in the same field, we're in the same conversation, but we're not experts in each other's crafts.
Totally. And it's like an ethical question too. Are you qualified to be paid for giving this advice, and are you going to stand behind it? And in the weight management field, my gosh, like I often hear myself talking to we call at Enara Health, we call them members, patients, and they're just like, well, I've done this so many times. I've tried this program and that program and that program. And I often I hear myself saying like, there's just so many, even when I'm talking to people at a cocktail party, I'm like, I'm in a field that has a lot of like charlatans, right? There are a lot of weight loss spaces that are making money, like, or in it to make money, or doing these quick fixes. And I'm just like, we're not the same, we're evidence based, we're obesity trained. So there it is to to set yourself apart can be hard in a weird space like that.
Yeah. I feel like especially because they're like everybody knows somebody who's interested and who's gone through and had this transformational process, but it's hard for laymen in a sense to really be able to track and say who are the people and with the backing, with the evidence based, with the research based, and how does that play into my story.
Right. It is.
So it's kind of why we're asking these questions, right? Hoping to get a little bit more clarity.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. I appreciate this as kind of like a frame for the whole episode. I think is good. To kind of get the established Danielle is a credible source, that she's not just somebody that we found off the street, but also to kind of like, our audience is real people, right? Like they're on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube and all that. We're on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube and everything too, that like, yeah, there's a lot of sources out there. And I think this is an important conversation, even outside of this engagement, this interview, to talk about how do we evaluate those sources. And it is important to be able to consider who that's coming from, that what's their angle, right? Like if they're trying to sell their their individual
Course.
course or their, whatever it is, their content. Like, well, they've got an angle. They're going to be pushing it that way. And if they don't have the credentials, like, wow, that's something to look deeper into rather than to just take at face value.
Yeah. I mean, a quick story. When I had my daughter, I was carrying around 20 extra pounds of fat. And even being in this world and being trained on it and knowing everything about it, I had a blind spot and as to what I was eating myself and, the calories I was taking in. And I've done this for years before I was a dietitian, obviously not credentialed. And then meaning I was learning and understanding calories in and calories out, stuff like that. And I was on Facebook groups, these fitness Facebook groups and these diet Facebook groups. And I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I know this stuff, but even for someone like me in times of vulnerability, you go to whatever the shiniest object is to help you hit your goal because you're desperate or you're wanting to get better. And so, and everyone falls into this trap, regardless of whether it's nutrition or finance or something else. So it's hard.
Absolutely. So you mentioned calories in and calories out, and I wanted to ask, is weight change as simple as that? Or is there more that plays into the equation?
I think it's a good question. I think yes, to some degree, no to a lot of degrees. You want your body to be able to, to see weight loss, you want your body to burn through your fat stores. But there are different ways that you can achieve this. So if you're burning as many calories as you're taking in, your weight's going to pretty much stay stable. If you start burning more, then your body's going to have to turn to certain other resources within your body to burn it. And that's why you typically see weight loss in that way. So the food you eat, the quality, how often you eat, how much you're moving your body, they all make a difference there. If you wanted to boil it down and someone said to me, how do I lose weight? I would probably say take in 300 to 400 calories less than you're taking in now, but like that doesn't help anybody, right? Like there's so many other layers to that. So to some degree, yes. And it's way more complicated, I guess, to say too.
Yeah. Well, let's dig into some of that complexity a little bit. So like, what are the factors that contribute to like weight changes, like gaining or losing weight? Like what all kind of goes into that equation?
So I'd rather, I think, talk about what plays into why someone is struggling with their weight or how it starts, being overweight or having obesity. It starts with genetics and, what combination of genes you have makes you more susceptible or less susceptible to weight gain. It also can even have a factor in like how motivated you are to work out or how your body reacts to different foods to fitness. Yeah. So we do genetic testing at our company, and a lot of these things are predestined in your genetics. So when you're looking at that, you really say, wow, like this was out of somebody's control. And you have to look at it through that lens. Unfortunately, there's so much weight stigma around that you have to look at like, this is not the fault of somebody. This is a combination of genetics. It's then epigenetics, which is the environment that you grew up in. And it kind of explains how these genes get expressed, which changes your brain chemistry. And a lot of that is happening in the brain, right? So the other factors are like, are there health issues? Are you on medication? How is your endocrine system, right?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And I think that is like a more like meeting people where they're at. Like that is a more like empathetic approach to it rather than like blaming someone for it. That it's like, no, it's not just someone's fault that, oh, you just have no self-control. That's the reason that you're struggling with your weight, that it's bigger than that.
Yeah. To understand like why people gain and lose weight, your body is a science experiment, right? Your body is a machine, and there's a certain amount of calories that it needs to function at a basic level. So for your heart to be beating, for your muscles to work the way they do, for your brain, you need calories to fuel that.
Hmm.
And that depends on like what your weight is, what your height is, what your muscle and fat masses are in your body, right? And that's called your resting energy expenditure. So at rest, if you just sat on the couch all day, your body would still need to be doing all these things, and it needs fuel.
Hmm.
So to maintain your weight, you basically need to take in as many calories that matches what you're burning, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So if you end up taking in more and you're not burning it off with extra physical activity, then you'll start to see it in your weight.
Hmm.
Yeah, and the paleo diet got really popular for a long time and still is to some degree, but our world is very food centric. People use food for entertainment. They use it for comfort. They use it for
Yeah,
excitement.
it's very
So
social.
totally right. So you're ending up. We're just constantly inundated with food, extra food, and I love food, and food is great. But if it's not countered by physical activity, and for better or for worse, we're living like a very sedentary, not for better, not for better, for worse. We're not as active as our former ancestors were, right? So we have to counter it with exercise, and if there's resistance to exercise, then you're going to see more weight on your body.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense.
That makes
So
sense.
thinking about like your resting energy expenditure, how do you know what that is? How do you find that? Because
There are
it's
some,
different for
yeah.
everyone, right?
Yes. Yeah. So it really does rely on, like, it's like your height, your weight, your muscle mass. So we learn in nutrition school essentially to some formulas. So you can use some
Hmm.
factors along with adding in height and weight and your activity level, and you can create like you can calculate based on those numbers. It's not going to be totally accurate. There's also metabolic testing. So we use
Hmm.
at our office, we use a calorimeter, and you breathe in to it for 10 minutes. It actually measures your CO2 output, and you can actually figure out, they can figure out how many calories you're burning at rest based on
Oh, interesting.
Interesting.
algorithms or whatever machines do.
Yeah.
And then you'll have a better idea of what you're actually burning based on, your gender, your age, your height, your weight, and then actually
Hmm.
like the production of the CO2.
That's really cool. I didn't
Yeah,
know that was even an
exists. Yeah.
idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is really cool. It's so helpful too, because then you can really understand, like, the hardest part is figuring out how much people are eating every day.
Uh,
And,
Yeah.
getting an accurate understanding of that is actually the hardest part of all this.
yeah. So how could we get an accurate understanding of that, even as individuals, even when we're not talking to an RD?
Mhm.
Is it just looking at the side of the nutrition label on the box, or what's that look like?
I think the best way to do that is to use an app. I'm a big
Hmm.
fan. There's some apps out there. Lose It is one that I really like, and I've used myself over the years. MyFitnessPal as well. And once you start, you have to kind of start understanding how much you're eating, what it is you're exactly eating, and then putting it in and figuring that out. There's a learning curve. It's very granular, but these apps are great because once it starts knowing and storing your food, then you can put it in and it's pretty quick. You're just like, in, done, half a cup,
Hmm.
good. And then they can figure out what they're eating compared to what they're burning. And so those are all tools that people have access to. Those apps also do set it up so that you can put in what your height, your weight is, your age, and then they use the same formula, right? And they calculate how many calories you probably burn a day and what you want. If you want to lose 2 pounds a week, what does that mean? And
Yeah.
I hack the system a little bit, but those are there for people that want to try that.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So you talking about you want to lose 2 pounds per week kind of leads me into my next question, which is like I've heard a lot about like your weight fluctuates day to day based on if you've eaten yet, if you've recently used the restroom, anything like that. Um, is that true? And then like how much does your weight fluctuate in a day? And then like how do we measure from there?
Yeah, so it's true. Your weight is very much reliant on water fluctuations because your body is made up of
Mm.
mostly water. So, anytime you have salt or you eat too late or you're eating sugar or um, carbohydrates, something's heavy in sugar or carbohydrates, you tend to hold on to water. So, your weight can fluctuate. I've seen people's weight fluctuate 10 pounds in a day. I mean,
Wow.
bigger men. I've seen that before many times. So it really just depends on what, alcohol can do that. It really just, it's dehydration mostly. So
Mm.
the best thing you can do is weigh yourself in the morning after you've had a bowel movement. Sorry, dietitians talk about poop all day, every day, and we don't care and we don't know, we don't get it if people are weird about it.
It's a
Um,
big part of our lives. It's okay.
it is, yeah, yeah. And so yeah, so doing that, I've had people weigh themselves in the morning, before they've done everything and after they've gone to the bathroom, and then at night to see like the difference. And there's
Mm.
no point in doing that. You're going to drive yourself crazy. You will have eaten all day. So the same time every day, ideally in the morning, is the best way to see that, to see where you really truly are at. And ideally not after you've had like a big day or night of drinking, eating salty,
Mhm.
carby,
Yeah.
sugary foods. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's getting good data feels really important in this, um, because you're going to ride a big roller coaster if you're weighing yourself at different times throughout the day every day, right? And that's just, I don't feel like that's going to be helpful no matter what
Yeah.
your goals are, right?
No. Yeah. Too much data can be very off-putting as well, especially
Mm.
if you're struggling. We tell people that are getting started in looking at their weight and wanting to make healthier changes to get on the scale every day because you can understand like what does a hamburger do to your weight
Mm.
versus what does a salad do to your weight, and what does salty food do to your weight. So you kind of get an understanding of what, and that's, I think that's power, right? Like
Yeah.
knowing what food, it's not about being crazy about this stuff. It's just about, oh, this is like science. This is understanding where you're starting from and then using that information to make healthier choices long term, little by little, over time.
Yeah. Well, and earlier you referred to like the human body as a science experiment, and if you are treating it that way, not in like
Yeah.
a hyper lab sort
Machine
of a
was
way.
better, but yes, I did say
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. But like if you are like treating yourself as an experiment in some ways, which we've talked about this on this podcast in different contexts too, like that's that's important data to be able to understand how your body responds to different foods and how your weight responds to different foods and those sorts of things, especially if you do have weight goals. If you're trying to lose weight, you should know what foods impact that and what foods make perceptible changes with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the knowledge is power, and
Yeah.
one thing I'd like to say is that there is this raging discussion online and in social media, how much is too much, right? How much,
Hmm.
is it unhealthy to fixate on weight? And I think, there's valid points in all places, on all sides. But if you're somebody who is really wanting to see, some people are more detail oriented than others. Some are like, just tell me some habits and changes that are the most impactful, that are not going to ruin my life, that will help me get healthier. And we're like, great, I got those for you. I can tell you, the right, what your plate should look like. I could tell you how to move more. We could tell you how to move more. And then some people are like, but, and I had a patient today and I've been working with him for years, and he's like a former astrophysicist, right? And he is like teaching me stuff, right? Because he's like, well, my new body composition, which is what we do to actually get in there and learn, um, uh, like what their fat and muscle are doing month to month, which is really cool. And he's like, well, I've been exercising more and my insulin, I just got my labs done again and my insulin has been higher, but now it's lower. And I think it's because of the exercise I added. And, it's just like some people love this stuff, and you
Yeah.
can get as deep or as shallow as you want to be, whatever works for you. And then it's up to the RD or whoever's working with this person to follow their lead, you
Hmm.
know?
Yeah.
Kind of make it client driven in a sense and make sure like Like, yeah, what does that look like for a client who's never seen an RD before? Do people kind of start from any level? Is it I'm setting my own goals? Is it we're working together to make our goals?
Yeah, in this space, I've rarely met someone who has not been on multiple different diets and and
Hmm.
has lost and gained, lost and gained. And most people that come to us are on that roller coaster. They're either gaining or losing. Maybe they went hard, lost a bunch of weight, and really struggled with maintenance. And a lot of programs don't have a great maintenance program, and their weight shoots up again. And they're like, I'm just not a lot of people know how to just keep weight steady.
Hmm.
So they'll come in and we'll talk about what their lifestyle looks like, right? So I'm not going to say you need to start cooking 7 nights a week if they're like, well, I travel all the time and I have 5 kids and I this and that. Like, you have to know who they are, right?
Right.
To and then we we provide evidence-based understanding of like what does a healthy breakfast look like. We want to aim for protein and fiber to keep you full and to start the day off right and make sure you're going to the bathroom. And you say, well, I don't like breakfasts. Okay, well, let's start with lunch then. If you like lunch,
Hmm.
let's start with lunch and let's try to get you. And then so the picture kind of comes together slowly, but you just want to do, for me, I like to do enough goals that someone feels like they're working on something, that they're making traction, right? Because there's nothing that motivates somebody than seeing progress. And it's something that feels doable to them, but it doesn't change their life, right? Because, you
Yeah.
know, that's hard. So that's how we do that.
Hmm.
Yeah, find a more sustainable way to do it, because people are often motivated for a couple days to cut out all foods
Mm-hmm.
that are bad or whatever, and then that goes
Not
by the wayside
sustainable.
really quickly, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But it's not sustainable for a lot of
Mhm.
people.
Yeah.
And rightly so, like cutting all things out all at once. We have people that do it. And there's a way to do that, but you have to be very motivated to make this the number one priority for a certain period of time and then be ready to do the maintenance work. But
Hmm.
most people, I usually say, like, let's change as little as possible, squeeze as much like impact out of that we can before we add more stuff, more
Hmm.
goals, more changes.
That's a lot more achievable too, right? Rather than flipping your life upside down in a weekend, right? It's a lot more achievable to make a couple of changes or some minor tweaks to things that still will make an impact and will be encouraging enough to continue on the journey and stay committed, but without having to empty your entire fridge and freezer and throw
Yeah.
out your credit cards and all that, right? It's like, no, it's
Yeah. Most of the time, yes. I do have to say that we do have and this is, I'm not advertising, but we do have a plan that's a very low calorie diet, um, but it's all real food. And
Hmm.
people come in and they say, this is what I want to do. I will commit for 3 to 3 months, 3 to 6 months. And they do it great. And actually, the long term results
Hmm.
are just as good as the slower results, in maintenance, the long term maintenance results, which is
Oh, very cool.
incredible. Yeah.
Interesting.
Um, yeah, there's a whole science behind it, actually. It's not something we created, but it's not something we made up on our own. But we do it in a whole food fashion. So it's not shakes. So shakes and bars, I'm probably good. It's fine. You can cut it
Yeah.
out. But um,
No, let's go
hospitals,
in on shakes and bars.
Yeah.
a lot of hospitals do shakes and bar weight loss. Um, it's medical weight loss, and they're doing that to keep it very controlled. Oftentimes, people are going in for bariatric surgery, so weight loss surgery, and
Okay.
they need to get down to a certain weight first, and they show that they can make those dietary changes. Right? We do something similar, but it's all real food, so
Hmm.
um, it's a little less scientific in the sense that, well, someone might be eating a little more chicken or a little more
Hmm.
yogurt or whatever, but we give them guidelines, and it does the improvement in liver fat and insulin and often and blood sugars are incredible. And if we can keep it off, it's great. But most people, I mean, that takes like a very huge level of motivation in that period of time to prioritize that. So
Yeah.
um, long term, you can get similar results, but for most people, they're looking for, like, let's make smaller changes over time and make this feel like my life. a little slower.
Yeah.
What is a timeline that starts to feel significant if we're kind of talking about, you want to be keeping data daily if you're starting to get a good picture, and then you mentioned kind of 3 to 6 months for some of these diets. At what point does it start to feel like it's long-term change instead of short-term change?
That's a good
Mm.
question. I would say, a lot of people have trouble keeping off weight past 1 year, oftentimes.
Mm.
So if you can, it's more of like, yeah, so like 6 months, I would say 6 months to see like a 10% weight change, if that's what you're looking for to get healthier, like a longer term approach. But if you're keeping what you've lost off and you're sustaining habits, I'm not a habit expert, I'm not a habit specialist, so I'm sure there's data out there as to like what makes a habit and how many months you have to do it for. But I look at the results of it, and if the results are happening and people are continuing to feel good and make healthy changes through a year and more, I mean, that's when I feel like people are really keeping that, going to see some good long-term results from that. Does that answer your question?
Oh no, we're having a little bit of connectivity problems.
Oh,
Moment.
We are. Danielle, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
great.
Okay.
Did we lose that
Very cool.
whole part?
No,
So it should have come in on your end,
Okay.
but we maybe can't respond to it as informed as
we
we'd
didn't
like
hear
I
it
to
think
at
it
be
all,
was
able
but
to.
fine. I think it was great.
yeah. But the gist of that is you're saying changes more than a year. Like if you're able to sustain this weight change for more than a year, that's kind of you're willing to
Significant.
trust that as something that's significant. Yeah.
It's
Very cool.
significant. Yeah, I think that health changes um, can always be thrown aside when like a crisis happens. When people go through high
Mm.
levels of stress, a death, a divorce, a new baby, something like that. I mean, even the most stalwart people that have been like exercising every day and cooking their meals, it might be thrown out the window.
Yeah.
So it's also about being able to kind of bounce back with asking for help and bouncing back and getting back on those healthy habits. I think is important to and watch out for and understand that that's human.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense,
Yeah.
and it feels very. I like how you say it. That's human. It's very human.
Yeah.
We're not just going through life in an optimized fashion. We're just trying to make it a lot of the time,
Yeah.
and circumstances can change, and I think that's a really important thing in so many aspects of our lives, right?
Yeah. I think this self-compassion and like
Hmm.
compassion for people in general, knowing that this is hard, much like any other self-improvement is hard. Um,
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Yeah. I like it. Okay. I want to shift just a little bit and ask a question about BMI. So, BMI is a number that body mass index gets thrown around often in um, medical settings as like a one number that's kind of like able to look at, it's, I think it's just your height and weight, and there's some math in there, but it's in my experience kind of looked at as a single number that you're able to say like this BMI is a healthy BMI, that is not a healthy BMI. You're put into these categories by like underweight, healthy weight, overweight, obese, and then it
Mm-hmm.
scales from there, I think. um,
Yeah.
can you talk about some of maybe the drawbacks of using that as a meaningful data point in the weight loss conversation?
Sure. Yeah. So BMI, or body mass index, is really just a ratio of height and weight and times some some math stuff, right? So and it's not something I've ever been able to do without a calculator, but it's just a proportion of your height and weight, right? And it's long been the gold standard of how you classify somebody. And it's coming around now that it is so one sided that
Sorry.
Yeah, Jesse, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm
Is there
good.
an earthquake over
Yeah.
I just moved my knee.
there?
Oh.
Sorry. Do you want me to just keep going or start again or?
Yeah,
Just
just
keep
keep
going.
going.
Okay,
Just keep
keep going.
going.
Yeah, so it's becoming well known now that BMI is just like a one-sided, one-dimensional way of looking at it because it doesn't take into account body fat or muscle
Hmm.
mass. And I always use this reference, even though it's like dates me completely. But like Arnold Schwarzenegger in his prime probably had a high BMI because the muscle mass that he had and his body fat was low. He was still a
Hmm.
healthy guy, most likely like a fit guy. I should say fit guy. I don't know his health, but he would have had potentially an obese BMI because it only
Hmm.
looked at height and weight. Um, now that I say that, I don't know his height or his weight at his prime.
Yeah.
But my point is that it's better to know. So yeah, anything over 25 to 29, 25 to 30 is overweight. And then 30 to 35, you're in like class 1 obesity and upwards.
Hmm.
And again, like if somebody has a lot of muscle mass and a perfectly healthy percent body fat, they could still have an overweight BMI or even obese BMI.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's not great. And waist circumference is probably a better way.
Hmm.
Waist to hip ratio is probably a better way if you don't have access to a body composition machine or a DEXA scan or something like that. And
Yeah.
labs are going to be the most important.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I think I've heard like with BMI, not just Arnold Schwarzenegger, but most like professional athletes are
Yeah.
classified in like overweight or obese because there's such high muscle content on their
Mm-hmm.
bodies that they're jacked, right? That's their whole
Yeah.
life, and
Right.
that weighs a lot, and so there's kind of this weird classification as you look at them in comparison to BMI, when it really like it's not that, Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes, LeBron James, they're not obese. That's
Yeah.
not remotely what's going on with them. But
Right. Right.
yeah,
Yeah. So it's not, yeah, it's not a helpful, measure anymore, or it never was
yeah.
really.
Yeah. It feels like there's a lot of these I don't know, there are these one number solution to a really complex issue, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like maybe it's a little bit, maybe it's a range that can be a little bit accurate, but it's so not nuanced. And
Yeah. Even the scale, the
Hmm.
scale is not the end all be all of your health either. You could be at a certain weight and you actually have, prediabetes or super high cholesterol.
Hmm.
And, there's people that are unhealthier on the inside that are lower weight than people that have higher weight on the outside. So yeah, so I agree
Hmm.
with you. I think that there's a lot of emphasis on that, and there's so many ways to kind of figure out where you stand health wise, right out, outside of the scale.
Yeah, yeah. What would be some of those? I know you mentioned a couple as you're talking about BMI, but what would be some of those alternatives to just the scale or to BMI that maybe still are accessible? Because one of the reasons that like a scale is like your poundage is looked at as something that's used so broadly is because it's so easily accessible that you can get a scale for like
$14 at Target, right?
exactly right,
Right.
and then you can
Right.
check that whenever you want, right? And
Mm-hmm.
what are some alternatives that are maybe more accessible than getting your labs done, which I mean is not the most inaccessible thing, right? But like
Yeah.
what are some like more accessible um, metrics that can be more nuanced or helpful?
Well, accessible metrics, I would say, are, as I said, like waist to hip ratio, and waist circumference. And I'd have to get those numbers. Like I don't have them on the top of my head
Hmm.
anymore. But like under certain inches of your neck, there's a higher propensity to have sleep apnea. To
Oh,
a
interesting.
certain, yeah, if you have a waist to hip ratio that's less favorable, I mean, there's a connection to heart health, or your
Hmm.
waist circumference is over a certain amount. There's a connection to heart health there. So that's an easy thing to do. And you can easily look up online, like, you know, from what looks like a reputable source, like a Harvard Health or um, uh, even I think any really would say like, over there's a concern there. So that's fine.
Yeah.
If you're looking at, and now what I'd like to say is if you've made changes and you want to see ways that are felt that you feel like you're healthier, how are you sleeping? How are your clothes fitting? How much energy do you have? And those are kind of easy ways. How are you moving about in the world? How is your mood? I mean, a lot of these are all connected, so they're a great way um, to gauge if you've made some changes to your health that will that have made you healthier. And I
Yeah.
think I think that's the most important way to think about health, is just like, how are you feeling? A lot of people, it's funny. I have a daughter, and I think kids are stressors, right? And
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, I think when we get to a certain age too, we're like, oh, we're supposed to feel tired. We're supposed to feel stressed. We're supposed to feel tired. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. I mean, you could feel tired at times, right? But trying to get enough sleep, eating as whole, unprocessed food as possible, moderating alcohol intake, and getting physical activity, there is a lot of opportunity to feel energetic at times that you should, and tired at times when you should, but it shouldn't be all the time. Like being sluggish and tired is indicative of something should be looked at and and maybe improved upon.
Yeah, I like that framework because we all are kind of in our bodies all the time. And so those are gonna feel like more honest metrics, I think, because deep down, yeah, like we're living it, we're experiencing it.
You know, you'll know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
when you're not feeling good.
Let's walk through a hypothetical. If I'm someone that wants to eat a healthier diet while maintaining a kind of a limited budget, right? Not necessarily needing to spend 30 cents a meal or anything, but do want to maintain my limited budget, and not necessarily looking to lose tons of weight or build tons of muscle. But I do want to be healthier, like you're talking about earlier, sleeping better, have more consistent energy levels, maybe maintain a consistent weight and go through that. Where do you start? Where would I start in this hypothetical?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you start with trying to figure out and understand where your food is coming
Hmm.
from. So, you want to start looking at how much of your diet is processed, or how much of it has some additives in it. So if you go to restaurants a lot, there's a lot of stuff in there you
Hmm.
don't know. Lots of butter, lots of salt, lots of oil. So if you can drill it down to um, preparing your own food as much as possible, that's the best way to start. It doesn't have to be every single meal, but get to know the grocery
Hmm.
store, get to know how to cook simple things so that you can rely on yourself to provide your food. So knowing what's in your food, how much of your food has more than three ingredients in
Yeah.
it, right? um, and the question before about processing, like, the more processed food you have, the more things are in it that you don't
Hmm.
know. So going to like meat, fish, beans, vegetables, fruit, if you can drill it down to the things that have the least amount of ingredients in it, from that show up in your grocery bag with the least amount of ingredients, that's the best place to start, I would say. And then on the other side, just start
Hmm.
moving more. Just move as much as possible, as much as you can all day long, whether that's intense physical activity and getting your steps up, or just getting your steps up. I think nutrition goes hand in hand with exercise and physical activity. So I think, that's where you start. There are so many ways to hack that. You can use Instacart if you
Hmm.
don't have time or want to go to the grocery store. You can, there's so many resources online that you can watch a simple YouTube video of how to cook an egg. I mean, there's so many great things you can do, but really kind of knowing what's going in your body is going to be the
Hmm.
first step.
That's cool. I like kind of starting with awareness as the main focus. Yeah, rather than needing to make a lot of changes, just being aware of what it is that you're putting in your body and what it is and how much you're moving, and I like that as a
Well,
very approachable first step.
and like you said earlier, knowledge is power. The it's so much easier to make a plan from a informed spot than from we were bashing a little bit earlier on like the Instagram fitness, the Instagram nutrition train. It's like, yeah, they don't know your situation, so it's like, who knows, right?
Yeah. And there's no one size fits all either. So, what works for one person doesn't work for the other. And there's no magic
Yeah.
gimmick either. Like, there's no magic diet other than, improving the quality of your food, potentially taking in less of it, if that is what makes sense, to you, and moving more,
Mm.
and, getting more exercise and activity. That's where it all, like, boils
Yeah.
down to, basically.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Okay, so we have talked before about this idea of prepsipes, which is something that you have talked about and something that kind of is in your wheelhouse a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about what that is and then how to approach that kind of concept?
Yeah. So I sort of I trademarked that word or copyrighted it or something a couple of years ago, and I did nothing with it. I was going to make a website, and I did nothing with it, and now, like, people are going to hear this and go think it's maybe has lapsed. So, um, you know, some enterprising people are going to steal it. But a prep is like, um, it's the alternative to a recipe, right? A recipe has steps, specific ingredients, specific amounts, unique, specific utensils. And I just don't think that's realistic for a family of four on a
Hmm.
Tuesday night. So a prep recipe is just getting a flavor profile together, applying it to a piece of food, and cooking it as quickly and as healthfully as possible, and making, something delicious and healthy in less than 30 minutes. So, the prepsipes, that when I talk about prepsipes, I talk about, if getting inspiration from restaurants you like to go to, or foods, or, you know, uh, meals you've had in the past, and figuring out, okay, what are the main ingredients? And
Hmm.
usually it's just a bunch of spices and some other additives. So if you love, you know, Japanese food, then maybe, having miso. Miso might be like an extra, a secondary level, a second level ingredient for some people, but, ginger, garlic, and soy sauce, for
Mhm.
example. And you can apply that to salmon or cauliflower rice, or beef or anything else. And you just put this, simple amount of ingredients together, and you have them as staples in your fridge or your pantry. And you just apply it to
Mm.
whatever it is you want to eat that week. So I've done a few classes on this. Chicken fajita recipes, right? Like, vegetables you like, chicken, shrimp, beef, whatever it is, and then having like 3 or 4 pantry staple spices that you use.
Mm.
And then you have a meal. And that's, trying to, like, simplify it so it doesn't feel so
Yeah,
overwhelming.
I
Yeah,
like
I
that.
like that. I like that a lot. I mean, in my cooking, I often add the same things to a lot of different things I'm cooking.
Yeah, perfect, right? So it's like, okay, cool. I love this. I grew up in New York. I grew up in Queens. Um, my mom is Jewish. Everything she
Mm.
cooked was Asian. And now everything I cook has some sort of Asian influence. My husband's like, "Why is this Asian again?" And I was like, I struggle. I struggle with other, but you know what? It's delicious every
Yeah,
time, and I know how to do it, to make it delicious,
yeah,
and I don't have to think about it. Um, so yeah, that's kind
I
of the
like it.
concept.
I like it, and I think like for me, if I were to think about my own cooking, like I lean into Italian or Mexican. Like those are the two um, that I make, and so I use a lot of oregano. I use a lot of garlic. I use a lot of like those sorts of things, and it's easy, right? That can go on pretty much anything and make it taste in a way that I know I'm gonna like, and yeah.
But you know what? A lot of people can find that
Hmm.
unattainable. They don't. know, that comes naturally to a lot of people until some people, I mean, boiling an egg is hard.
Yeah.
So, introducing people to the concept of not everything has to be a New York Times recipe is, I think, where you start, and then build from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's been kind of an interesting thing for me to learn recently. So I just graduated college and am making my way in the world, and finding like it's a different world, different life stage and everything. And in college, I loved to find a complicated recipe that took 45 minutes to make because I'd only cook one night a week, and the other 6 I'm at the cafeteria. And I'm finding now, it's like, oh, it's 6:30. I gotta eat something, and I
You have to feed
don't have the
yourself.
45 minutes or the interest in that. And so it's been fun and challenging to find like what are the sustainable meals that I like to eat. And I'd definitely be looking into making some prep recipes for myself.
Some prep recipes, yeah. I can send you some. I'm dating myself again as I find out you're right out of college.
Well, he's young.
When I was in
too.
college.
He's young. Well, he's young.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Joe. I appreciate that. You're the bridge between us. When I was in college, I loved my George Foreman grill. Do you guys know the George Foreman grill? I mean, it is amazing. I think there's like a resurgence potentially of it, but that was such a wonderful cooking tool because you've got all the fat dripping down. And you're grilling chicken in a matter of minutes with minimal, smoke. And you don't have to, I still don't know how to really barbecue very well. I mean, now we have Instant Pots and air fryers, and those can be so, so helpful to cook things that are healthy and easy and quick. And I love them. But, the Instant Pot is, the George Foreman walked so the Instant Pot could run.
Amen. We might use that as the headline for this whole episode. Oh, I love it. Well, Danielle, I do want to be respectful of your time, and respectful of our listeners' time and also of ours. So before we wrap up, I have a couple of questions for you, as if we haven't just been going through a bunch of questions. But the first one is, where could people find more of you if they're interested in this and interested in this conversation and want more of it?
Where can they find me? They can find me on LinkedIn. I love having coffee chats with people. So just Danielle Cortez. And I'm on Instagram at obesityrddc, which I sort of go in and out of. It's got personal content, but kind of weight and nutrition centric, food centric, but it's not as prolific as I would like it to be. And those are the two places you can find me.
I love it.
And
great.
We'll have both of those linked below. And given you just shared the handles, so yeah, we're gonna link both of those below. Great. The other thing, do you have any closing thoughts or anything else that you wanted to touch on that we didn't get to in this time, or anything that you would like to leave as parting thoughts for this episode?
Yeah, I'm just happy. I love talking about health in general. I love talking about how you can be healthier, feel healthier, and it's so much more doable than people think, and it could be as simple or as complicated as you want it to be, but there are people out there that can help give guidance. And I think people should always I love, this podcast, and I love the idea of what you guys are doing, and just making what seem like complicated topics more accessible to people. And, I love being part of that. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Yeah.
You could have been doing anything this Thursday night.
Yeah.
Thank you for choosing this.
We've both learned a lot from it, and I know our listeners will as well. So really, really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you.